Hello everyone, welcome to CLAT 2024 analysis. I know most of you are really happy because the CLAT paper was not as difficult as we were expecting. The kind of questions that we have been coming across maybe in 2023, 2022, this year's paper, be it English section, be it legal section, be it logical section, be it quant section or current affairs section, had that some doability that all kinds of students had something that they could do. Having said that, it's not that good a news that you can think of, because if it's easy for you, it was easy for all the candidates. Now here in this session, we are going to analyze the paper, the difficulty level, the kind of questions that were there, what could be the cutoff, what were the good attempts, and how the overall paper, overall experience of the students, of the expert faculties, what they have observed. That is what we are going to discuss right now. Now, as expected and as was announced, there were only 5 sections: English language, current affairs, legal reasoning, logical reasoning, and quant. However, there were few minor surprises. Say, for example, in CLAT 2023, there was a standard format that was followed, that there is a passage and there were 5 questions. Passage, 5 questions. This time, there was a passage and 6 questions, sometimes 7 questions, sometimes 4 questions. So that uniformity was slightly changed this time. Apart from that, one more change was observed, that in current affairs section, in general knowledge section, you actually did not require knowledge in some of the questions. You could infer the answers from the given passage. That was a great opportunity for candidates who had trouble with the general knowledge section, because this time it was not much of a test of your knowledge than your ability to infer, than your ability to imply from the given passages, from the given statements. So that was a breather, the general knowledge current affairs section. You would have got a lot of questions right simply because you could infer irrespective of whether you knew about the topic or not. And the topic that were asked were very predictable. Had you been attending time classes or online classes, recorded classes, we have talked about these topics like G20. We have talked about Israel-Palestine conflict in detail. These were the most predictable topic of this year 2023. And that was what they tested. So it's a great opportunity. It was a great opportunity for all the candidates who read about it. And the questions were very basic. The cause of war and the very, very basic things that any serious candidate would have easily sailed through. Having said that, let's see the kind of questions that other sections had. English language had, again, fairly easy passages. First passage was very easy. Few passages may be easy to moderate level, but overall, if you'll say, the passages were of easy category, if you'll say on an average. There were total 24 questions, as was already expected, in English language, and all the 24 questions were RC based. Only RC questions. So there was hardly any, only one vocabulary you could find in all the question types. So not very complex questions, nothing deep knowledge of grammar, nothing of that sort was required. Very common sense, RC based. Even naturally, if you have some sense of the language, you could have got the right answers. The options were such that you could have easily eliminated. So these were some of the great things that were there in the paper, that was there for all the candidates, for every candidates who, so that no one is feeling left alone. So there was something for all the candidates that, okay, at least I'm getting these many marks from this section. None of the 5 sections was such that you would feel like that I do not know any of these, or I'm losing a lot of marks. So that is one thing. Coming to current affairs, as I already told you, predictable questions, questions like Israel-Palestine, questions like G20, and surprisingly 3 passages were not from any specific source. Those 3 passages were from speeches. The first passage was from B.R. Ambedkar's speech that he gave regarding the social democracy in the Constituent Assembly. One was regarding the the Jallianwala Bagh speech that general gave, that colonel gave. Another was that PM Modi's speech regarding the Chandrayaan. And Chandrayaan again was a very predictable topic. So predictability of the topic that we have discussed at length for in several classes, several sessions, we have discussed that in so many classes that would have, I'm assuming that had you been attending those classes, you would have found it very comfortable to sail through. Coming to logical reasoning, it was purely critical, and again not as easy as other sections, moderate, and some candidates might have even found it hard, but doable, quite doable. Logical reasoning was quite doable. Coming to legal reasoning section was also slightly different from what we had last year. Last year, in all the legal reasoning section, there was a passage, there were 5 questions. This time, there was a passage, there were 6 questions, and sometimes the questions were not situation based. They were direct questions. There were things like, what do you infer from this passage? What is the central idea? The kind of questions that you will find in critical reasoning, or the kind of questions that you will find in, say, English section, were there in the legal section. So even if you did not know law, that anyway CLAT says that you do not need the knowledge of law, you would have easily aced the legal section as well. Quant had 12 questions, 2 sets, 6 questions each. Again, very basic questions, concepts like ratio, proportion, percentages, ratio, average, percentages, that's all. Nothing else, no permutation combination, no simple interest, compound interest, nothing. So all those who were scared of mathematics, who were not touching this subject because I'm not from science background, or this is the section I'm thinking of ignoring, even if you had just gone through the basic concepts of percentages, ratio, proportion, this was a doable section. Now let's get slightly into details of these sections. Starting with the English section, as I told you, it was easy to moderate and slight deviation from last year, because last year every passage had 5 questions each, but this time there was 6 questions each. So 1 less passage, thereby saving your time. And anyway, this time it was 120 questions instead of 150 questions. So overall, you were also saving time in the pattern of this year compared to last year, and the less number of passages also helped you save some time. That's why it was not very difficult to complete the whole paper in the given amount of time. Then coming to the surprises, yes, there were few surprises, as I mentioned. Surprises in terms of the way of asking questions, surprises in terms of the kind of questions that were presented, the kind of approach that was required to tackle those questions, which was slightly different from what you have been doing in previous years. But this was different but very doable, easy, with easy options that could have been eliminated easily, and that's how you could have easily done that. There were 4, coming to legal reasoning. Legal reasoning, we had 5 passages, and legal reasoning was the lengthiest section in terms of numbers. There were 32 questions in legal reasoning. So in terms of numbers, it was lengthiest, and the selection of topics was very unique. Gone are the days when we used to have tort, contract, constitution, criminal, and all the questions revolved around these concepts. No, we have new era questions now. We have questions from data protection. We have questions from juvenile justice. We have questions from all the latest acts, the latest bills that have been passed in the parliament, that have been in the discussion, that essentially is the part of current affairs, legal current affairs, that seeps into your legal reasoning section, legal reasoning passages. And the sources that were used for these passages were sources like the Hindu, Indian Express, the Wire. And we keep telling you in our classes also that these are the probable sources. IP does, the print, these are some of the sources that CLAT has repeatedly taken passages from. So that is one good thing about passage based questions, that you get to know the sources from where these passages are being taken. Family law was explored, but slightly in a different manner. It was regarding inheritance in cases of void and voidable marriages. What are the rights of the children born out of void and voidable marriages? The questions were repetitive. The same concept was tested in a different manner. That okay, this is the fact situation, and will he inherit the property or not? This is the situation, will he inherit the property or not? So similar concept tested in different fact situation, different situations. So once you get to the fundamental concept of the passage, that okay, this is what the passage is saying, and once you get hold of that, you could have easily answered all these 7 questions, because uh, underlining uh, the underlining understanding was the same. Then we had this digital that Personal Data Protection Act. That again was a new age question. That again was a question that talked about a lot of things, and you did not require the knowledge of law. Most of the information was given in the passage. Everything you could have easily inferred from the passage, and quite doable. These 6 questions, out of these 6 questions, at least 4 were quite doable. So this again takes it to this Juvenile Justice Act. Now, this Juvenile Justice Act and online defamation, these were 2 passages that were as easy as it gets. It's like giving you the answer and asking you to say it back, asking you to repeat what I just said. That was the level of these 2 passages as far as Juvenile Justice Act is concerned and online defamation is concerned. Like the statement is written in the passage, and the same statement is you are being asked to repeat the same statement in the form of a question. So I'm pretty sure that most of the candidates must have got at least the legal section, at least these passages, passage 3 and passage 5, right, correct, at least 90% of this right. Then we had a PRP bill. We had this press and this media related bill. This again had very easy questions, common sense based questions. That there were questions like in the definition of newspaper, if there is a folded sheet, then which of the following can be considered as a newspaper? Now you don't need a knowledge for that. You don't need legal knowledge for that. You know that if you are talking about sheets, if you are talking about paper, it has to be print media. It cannot be digital. It cannot be online. So these are the kind of questions these are the kind of aptitude, these were the kind of reasoning, these were the kind of thinking that was expected out of you. And I'm pretty sure had you been attempted the paper with a calm mind, and you had sufficient time, these are not challenging questions. These were doable questions. And as far as legal reasoning section is concerned, out of 32 questions, most candidates could have easily scored a 26 plus if they played their cards right. Now, moving on to the next section, we had I talked about English language section earlier. There were 4 passages, 6 questions each. The first passage was regarding literature. It talked about how literature in general. It talked about a lot of novelists, a lot of poets, a lot of William Shakespeare and Jane Austen and everything. A very, very basic topic, very good topic with no complex vocabulary or a lot of jargons, nothing. Quite pleasing to eyes, quite understandable passage. Second passage was regarding a novel. There was Fire on the Mountain, and that was also a good read. If you have this habit of reading, that we keep encouraging that you should develop this habit for the paper like CLAT. So you would have found comfort in this passage as well. Third passage was regarding this. Yeah, this was a slightly relatively compared to other passages. This third passage was not as easy as the other passages, but it was also quite doable. And the fourth passage was this the namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri, and a lot of discussion regarding that. So a very short passage, not a very long passage. So again, this was not very easy because it had a mix of easy and moderate passages, but again quite doable. And 18 to 20 questions you could have answered out of these 24 questions that were there in the English section. So we talked about legal section, we talked about English section. Let's also Okay, so yeah, as I told you, that fire on the mountain. So as far as fire on the mountain is concerned, they had inference questions that were and the options were very easy to eliminate. Then this judicial reform passages, they were agree disagree questions. Do you agree with the author? Do you not agree with the author? There were vocabulary. There was at least one question on vocabulary. Then and those were easy to moderate. Passage 4, it was the it was on interplay between characters. That again, it was moderately difficult, not very easy, because that was about word, and how charismatic and mysterious the word is. So that had uh, some words that if you're not a voracious reader, you would have found slightly new, so to say. Then coming on to the next sections, overall difficulty of English section was again not very hard, but moderate to hard, or I would personally say easy to moderate, but some candidates might have found slightly more than moderate. So let's keep it moderate. Uh, as I told you, out of 24, 18, at least 18 questions could have been easily attempted. Uh, Good vocabulary, not because there were direct vocabulary questions, but for the understanding of, say for example, the last passage, which had really good vocabulary, and until and unless your vocab is good, you would have found you would have struggled a bit with that passage. So good vocabulary, good reading habit, because there was excerpts from the novels as it is, so that would have helped candidates. And if we compare it to the last year CLAT, not much different. Last year CLAT, as far as English section is concerned, except of course the factors that we already discussed, that last year there were 5 questions per passage, this year there were 6 questions per passage. So those differences, those pattern differences were there. Current affairs, already talked to you, very predictable topics. Ambedkar speech regarding Constitutional Assembly, and very surprisingly there were questions that did not require knowledge, but your ability to infer from the passage. Say for example, they asked you what is social democracy, and it was mentioned, it was not directly in the exact words given in the passage, but it was mentioned in the passage what is social democracy in different words, and the options given were in different words. So if you could have inferred it, you could have easily got it. Similarly, with the G20, this required knowledge. Passage 2 required knowledge. You were required to know who are the members of G20, who are not the members of G20, and who will be hosting and things like that. Then this Jallianwala Bagh. Now this is like this cannot be categorized as current or even as a GK, because it was not fact based either, except one question that that was asking the full name of General Dyer. There were other questions that were not knowledge based, that were not current, that was not at all current affairs. So Jallianwala Bagh is something that it's practically speaking, it's a modern history question, but it was not checking your facts, it was not checking your knowledge, it was just checking things that were already given in the passage, and you had to infer from the passage. It was more of a RC rather than a GK, I would say, but that's how it was. Then we had this question about Chandrayaan, and it was not much about Chandrayaan rather than the speech that Prime Minister Modi gave to the ISRO scientist. And again, some inference based question, that who is the Prime Minister addressing? He was in one of the lines in the passage, he says that this is done by you, the scientist. That means he's addressing the scientist, and that was the question. So these are common sense based questions. You do not need to prepare or work really hard for such kind of questions, or any knowledge was not required. Just the presence of mind, just the calm mind, just the way you tackle that question, and whether you can understand what the question is trying to ask, that was required. Then we had this again, Israel-Palestine conflict is one such topic that has been consistently in news since several months now, and it was absolutely 99% probable, predicted that it will have its presence in the CLAT paper, and that's what happened. So a lot of people were ready for this. You would have come across this news. Even if you do not have the habit of reading newspaper or magazine or anything like that, you would have come across it in social media, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere, regarding any opinion by someone. You would have you would have your own opinions regarding this issue. So that is something that was expected. So there was 6 questions each. Overall difficulty level of the section, again I would say easy to moderate. uh, Undoable sets, except the if you do not have the knowledge of topics like G20 and Israel Palestine, then of course you will lose marks, because other sections, even if you did not know it, you could have done, you could have guessed at least. So there were no undoable sections. Of course, it's a general knowledge section, so you had to know, you should have knowledge, but otherwise it's there was no such section that was undoable in GK. Then topics covered I've already discussed, very predictable topics and 3 speeches. Section compared to last CLAT, this is important to discuss, because in last CLAT the passage was of hardly any use. You could hardly find answer to any question in the given passage. The passage was just to give you a reference that this is the topic that we are talking about, but the questions had nothing to do with the passage. But this year the whole game changed, and almost 5 out of 6 questions you will find from the passage. So this year you have to change the strategy. If you were taking this for granted that I don't need to read the passages in the general knowledge section, now that has to change, because the questions were from the passages directly. Logical reasoning section, again this was not that easy, let me warn you. Moderate to difficult, I would say. And again there were 4 passages. The first passage was regarding the suicide rates and what the reasons behind that, and how the coaching institutes and the merit based system that we have is responsible for that, and what can be done about it. Then there was a second passage that was a business case study, that again a very interesting passage. This passage had some tough questions, the second passage. The third passage was the AI governance in India, very hot topic. You must have come across a lot of articles and things regarding that, but asking that in form of critical reasoning questions was a different feel altogether, and I'm pretty sure you would have tackled it well. Then the fourth passage was regarding this words. This again was a slightly abstract passage, and if there is someone who is not from humanities background, he would have found this passage slightly new, or slightly unique, or slightly something that not that comfortable. So this was slightly of a different level, I would say. Then all the passages had questions of true, which of the following, what do you think is true, what is not true, and we had inference based questions, strengthening, weakening arguments. We had the application types. The application questions required the principles from the passages to hypothetical questions. These are something that you are already used to. You have been exposed to such questions in your mocks, in your previous experiences. Again, moderate difficulty, but I would say difficult. And you could have answered 14 to 16 questions in this passage, in this section, sorry. As far as quant is concerned, as I mentioned in the beginning of this session, that there were only 12 questions, only limited topics were tested, ratio, averages, percentage. If you had slight idea about these basic concepts that you have been studying since your early school days, you would have got through it. However, there were 2 sets. The set 1 was relatively easy. Set 2 had difficult calculation, not the difficult question, but the calculation required some time and required careful examination. So if you're good with calculation, you would have got these 12 marks correct. But even otherwise, 7 to 8 marks were quite doable in this section. So overall difficulty level of this section, and as far as quant is concerned, could be said easy to moderate. And if you're depending on your calculation speed and other things, because there are PP applicants in CLAT who don't even think of touching the quant section. So for those candidates also, at least the first section could have been easy. Topics covered, again, profit, averages, not profit, profit loss aside, nothing was asked. Only ratio, averages and percentage. So the topics that were completely absent were probability, so many topics that we prepared for in general, what forms the part of your mathematics or quant syllabus. Nothing was present, no detailed anything that you can expect. It was it was limited to very limited topics, because although there were 12 questions, but all the questions were regarding these three topics only. If you know percentage, if you know averages, if you know these only these three topics, you could have done all the 12 questions. So yeah, as I told you, these were the only topics covered. If we compare it to last year there was more variety of questions which was missing this time. Overall, so talking about the paper, talking about the overall CLAT 2024, the overall paper was easy to moderate. I would say easy, but of course it's a competitive examination. If it's easy for you, it's easy for everyone. So the cutoff is definitely going to be high. This is the first time that the CLAT will be of 120 marks instead of 150 marks. So we are not really sure about how this will pan out in the we do not have the database to compare it with last year cutoff. Last year we were looking at it from 150 mark standard. Now we have to see it as per the 120 marks. But what we predict, what we can assess as per our assessment, after talking to the students, after talking to the expert faculties, is that 85 to 90 is a good score to get into a top 10 national university for this CLAT 2024. And of course, it remains to be seen how the other candidates have done, because the paper was not difficult. Cutoff is going to be higher than usual, and it's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. And it remains to be seen that how which NLU you get. We will be sharing a lot of details regarding which colleges, which colleges to choose, which colleges to apply for, what are the things you can do now, when are the results getting announced, how to follow up, and a lot of things regarding following this CLAT. We have this ALAT examination on 10th December. So based on the experiences that you have had after writing CLAT, implement all that. Be ready for any surprises, if any. Be ready for anything, any mistake if happened, correct that, improve that, and appear for this ALAT that is coming next week or next Sunday. All the best. It was a great experience for all of us. I hope that we all get to the national university of their choice. I hope that this paper taught us a lot. It taught us that sometimes we might think something, we are going to face something that is something that we cannot do, but it turns out that we can easily do that. It also teaches us that sometimes we take things for granted, but it turns out that okay, if it's easy for me, it's easy for everyone. So every step we are learning something, and hope it was a great learning experience, and all the best for your results. See you in the next analysis. Till then, goodbye.